And did some amazing work with the Yardbirds. I mean, yeah, absolutely amazing. Out of this world then, and is out of this world now.
Jimmy Page stands as one of rock music's greatest architects. The Led Zeppelin founder didn't just create legendary riffs and thunderous albums. He shaped the entire landscape of hard rock and influenced generations of guitarists who followed. Before forming Zeppelin, Page spent years as London's most sought-after session guitarist, playing on hundreds of recordings with everyone from the Kinks to the Who. Then came his time with the Yardbirds, where he honed innovative techniques that would define his signature sound.
Sessions for this fellow called George Ogomelski, who actually was the manager of the Yardbirds, and he'd asked me to join the Yardbirds.
His playing style became known for wild abandon, bluesman grit, and folk musician sensitivity, all wrapped into one. But Page's genius didn't emerge from nowhere. It came from deep love and respect for the bands that inspired him, from Chicago blues legends to rockabilly pioneers.
Because I had the same roots as the sort of bands that were around, like the Stones and the Beatles, and I could just sort of put in riffs, and this was great fun.
These are the 7 acts Page could watch forever, the musicians who shaped the man who would become known as the pontiff of power riffing. 7. Pentangle. Pentangle brought British folk baroque that utterly obsessed young Jimmy Page.
But then the cow behind the weakness, that's a rolling.
The band formed in 1968 when Scottish guitarist Bert Jansch joined forces with John Renbourn, creating intricate acoustic interplay that revolutionized folk music. Page discovered Jansch's debut album in 1965 and couldn't believe what he heard. At one point, I was absolutely obsessed with Bert Jansch, Page recalled decades later.
Everybody's these master musicians playing together.
When I first heard that LP, I couldn't believe it. It was so far ahead of what anyone else was doing. Page became a regular fixture at Soho folk clubs, watching Pentangle perform and absorbing every note from Jansch's revolutionary finger-picking technique. The acoustic guitarist crystallized everything about folk guitar playing as far as Page was concerned. Jansch's version of the traditional song Blackwater Side directly inspired Black Mountain Side on Led Zeppelin's first album. Page admitted years later he wasn't totally original on that track. The influence ran deeper than one song. Page's entire approach to acoustic guitar came from studying Jansch's work. That folk Baroque sound, those complex time signatures, those Celtic and Indian fusion ideas became fundamental to Led Zeppelin's acoustic passages. 6. The Cream. The Cream showed Jimmy Page that blues could explode into something heavier and louder than anyone imagined. Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker formed the supergroup in 1966, creating what many consider the first power trio. Page already admired Clapton from his Yardbirds days. "He's definitely got the touch," Page said. His work with the Yardbirds was really great, and that touch is still there. Page worked with Clapton before Cream even existed. In 1965, Page produced several John Mayall tracks featuring Clapton's guitar work. When Clapton wanted to add feedback wail over "I'm Your Witch Doctor," the engineer complained this guitarist was impossible to record. Page told him to get on with his job and leave decisions to the producer. Cream became a massive commercial success between 1966 and 1968.
Something as radical at that time that involved acoustic and electric guitars and this.
They were very loud, Page acknowledged. They got caught up in having huge banks of Marshall amps. But they had a really strong foundation in blues and jazz. Led Zeppelin took up Cream's legacy when they formed months after Cream's farewell, proving loud blues rock was inevitable. 5. 10 years after. 10 years after brought lightning-fast blues rock that earned Jimmy Page's lasting respect.
Then about my baby Lord.
Alvin Lee's guitar pyrotechnics and the band's relentless energy made them one of Britain's most exciting live acts. Page specifically named Lee among the elite. Out of all guitarists to come out of the 60s, Beck, Clapton, Lee, Townshend, and I are still having a go, Page told Rolling Stone in 1975. That says something.
Obviously Ronnie and Keith, and oh gosh, there were loads and loads.
Alvin Lee came from Leicester, outside the London blues scene where Page emerged. So he was never in with it a lot, Page recalled, but Lee's playing spoke for itself. His blistering performance at Woodstock in 1969 became one of the festival's most memorable moments. That 11-minute version of I'm Going Home showcased his incredible speed and technical mastery. 10 years after shared bills with Led Zeppelin during 1969 American tours. Page genuinely admired Lee's playing. All the top guitar players respected Alvin, according to those close to Lee. For Page to include Lee alongside Beck and Clapton was ultimate recognition of Britain's guitar elite. 4. Jimi Hendrix experience. Jimi Hendrix was the guitarist Jimmy Page placed above all others. When Rolling Stone asked Page in 1975 about American guitarists he admired, his response came immediately and solemnly. We've lost the best guitarist any of us ever had, and that was Hendrix. Page meant those words completely. Hendrix had died 5 years earlier at age 27, leaving behind revolutionary recordings that changed everything guitarists thought possible. Page's playing style drew comparisons to wild abandon often associated with Hendrix, passion and grit of seasoned bluesmen, and sensitivity of folk musicians all combined.
He was a really, really lovely man, and he was a fine guitarist and singer.
But Page never claimed equality with Hendrix. He recognized genius when he heard it. Hendrix's groundbreaking debut album, Are You Experienced, arrived in 1967, showing the world an entirely new approach to electric guitar. His use of feedback, distortion, and wah-wah pedal created sonic landscapes nobody had explored before. Hendrix made guitar scream, whisper, cry. Tragically, Page never got a proper chance to talk with Hendrix or see him perform live extensively. He once went to a club in New York called Salvation where Hendrix was present. But Hendrix was totally out of it that night, barely conscious. Page had planned to say hello, but realized there would be a more favorable time. In the end, there wasn't another time. Page heard Hendrix's records naturally, but it would have been a tremendous thrill to see how he worked things out on stage. That was quite another ball game entirely. Hendrix's death robbed rock music of its greatest guitar innovator, leaving Page and an entire generation of guitarists to carry forward the revolutionary spirit Hendrix embodied. 3. The Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones showed Jimmy Page what British musicians could do with American blues. Page remembered when Stones first started, they were doing really good interpretations of Muddy Waters songs and all that chess catalog. They weren't only ones, of course, but down in South London, that was what was going on everywhere. Young British musicians were discovering Chicago blues and making it their own. Page first met Mick Jagger and Keith Richards in 1962 at American Folk Blues Festival in Manchester, before Stones even existed. They were just blues enthusiasts on pilgrimage, like all of us, Page recalled. That day, they heard Howlin' Wolf's album with a rocking chair on the cover for the first time. Nobody had heard it until then, but they all heard it that day together. That was one life-changing moment they shared. Page watched Stones transform from blues purists into rock and roll legends. He particularly admired how Brian Jones played slide guitar, a rare skill among British guitarists at that time. Page saw Jones at Ealing Jazz Club playing bottleneck guitar. Page was struggling with Elmore James stuff, couldn't figure it out. Suddenly watching Jones, it clicked. It was in the tuning. Jones was doing it right. Page finally understood how to approach slide guitar. Years later, in 1974, Page recorded with Keith Richards at Island Studios in London. They stayed up all night working on a song called Scarlet, eventually released decades later. Page said the thing he remembered most was that Richards was solid and driving, didn't make mistakes, kept going all the way through. Page realized just what powerful force Richards was behind those Rolling Stones records. There was no doubt about it. Page knew his career paralleled Richards' path completely. Both young punks learned from American records. Both devoted themselves to blues. Both built legendary rock bands on that foundation. 2. Little Feat. Little Feat was Jimmy Page's favorite American group of all time. In a 1975 Rolling Stone interview, Page casually dropped this revelation while discussing bands he admired. This wasn't just any casual remark. These words came from one of rock's founding fathers, delivering insight into his favorite music and claiming the title of America's greatest for one of their most undervalued groups.
Guess that guitar player sure could play. She always liked to sing along.
Formed in 1969 by singer-songwriter and guitarist Lowell George alongside keyboardist Bill Payne, Little Feat started their genre-melding outfit in Los Angeles. They combined elements of blues, folk, rock and roll, soul, and swamp pop into something completely unique. George had been fired from Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention after performing his song Willin', which contained drug references Zappa wouldn't tolerate. Zappa told George to go start his own damn band, then helped secure a recording contract with Warner Brothers. Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant shared Page's enthusiasm. Plant stayed at LA Plaza Hotel, where the Attorney General complained about Plant playing Little Feat records too loud. The Plant didn't care. He loved their sound that much. George was a phenomenal slide guitarist who used a chrome-plated socket wrench as a slide. He ran guitar through twin studio compressors, creating smooth tones with almost infinite sustain. His slide playing on songs like Dixie Chicken and Rock and Roll Doctor became instantly recognizable. Little Feat never achieved huge commercial success, but musicians who mattered recognized their brilliance. Bonnie Raitt drove to California just to work with George after hearing Sailin' Shoes. Rolling Stone readers named their live album Waiting for Columbus 7th best live album of all time. Despite critical acclaim and a devoted following, the band struggled with internal tensions. George's substance abuse accelerated through the mid-1970s. By midday, he was often on a second bottle of brandy with a mound of cocaine ready. George died tragically in a hotel room in Arlington, Virginia on June 29, 1979. He was only 34 years old. Page lost one of American bands he most admired, a group whose musical experimentation and genre blending matched his own adventurous spirit with Led Zeppelin. 1. The Yardbirds. The Yardbirds weren't just another band Jimmy Page played with. They were the laboratory where he transformed from session musician into visionary band leader. The Yardbirds launched careers of three of rock's most famous guitarists. Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page all ranked in the top 5 of Rolling Stone's greatest guitarists list. This wasn't a coincidence. The Yardbirds were the ultimate guitar band. Pioneering psychedelic rock and early hard rock while contributing to electric guitar innovations of the mid-1960s. Page met Jeff Beck when both were teenagers with homemade guitars. They went back that far, learning together, studying Gene Vincent and rockabilly records. When Clapton left Yardbirds in 1965, the band first approached Page. He declined out of loyalty and concerns about touring, recommending Beck instead. Beck brought experimental genius to the band, exploring fuzz tone, reverb, feedback, sustain, distortion. His time with Yardbirds was the most groundbreaking era, Page later acknowledged. It grew by leaps and bounds, really. In June 1966, bassist Paul Samwell Smith quit the band after a drunken gig at Oxford. Page was at the show. That night he agreed to join on bass until rhythm guitarist Chris Drea could learn the instrument. Page made his debut at London's Marquee Club on June 21, 1966. Soon, Drea switched to bass, and Page moved to guitar alongside Beck, creating one of most formidable two-guitar attacks in rock history. Beck left the band in late 1966 during an American tour, volatile and moody as ever. Page continued with Yardbirds, steering them toward heavier, more dynamic sound. His vision for the band became increasingly experimental. When other members departed by mid-1968, Page reformed the group as New Yardbirds with Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham. That band, of course, became Led Zeppelin. Page was never ashamed of playing in Yardbirds. Everything he learned there, every technique he developed, every production idea he formulated went directly into the creation of Led Zeppelin. The first Zeppelin album didn't spring from nothing. It was the outcome of musical and production ideas Page had built with Yardbirds, his true training ground for becoming one of rock's greatest architects. From Yardbirds' experimentation to Little Feat's swamp rock, these 7 bands shaped Jimmy Page's revolutionary sound. Which influence surprised you most? Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.